Formula One will run 6 sprint events a season from 2023 onwards after the sport finally gained approval for more Saturday races. There will be 30 points paying races scheduled for the 2023 Formula One season thanks to the 24 rounds that have already been confirmed for 2023. What does this mean for F1 drivers? Was this decision motivated by a desire for increased revenue? Stay tuned to find out. Formula One teams and the owners of the sport, Liberty Media, unanimously supported plans in April to increase the number of sprint races on the calendar for the following season. However, the FIA stopped the move because FIA President Mohammed Ben Sulayem wanted to investigate the financial impact of the changes and determine whether or not an additional payment should be made to the governing body. His stance sparked fury at the time, with some sources saying that greed was driving the decision behind the FIA's decision to block the move. The matter had appeared to be stalled, but a special vote of the FIA's World Motorsport Council had finally approved the plans. The FIA has now announced that the number of sprint races will increase to 6 each year beginning in 2023. Speaking about the FIA's approval of the plan, Domenicali said, "I am pleased that we can confirm 6 sprints will be part of the championship from 2023 onwards, building on the success of the new format introduced for the first time in 2021. The sprint provides action across 3 days, with the drivers all fighting for something right from the start on Friday through to the main event on Sunday, adding more drama and excitement to the weekend. The feedback from the fans, teams, promoters, and partners has been very positive, and the format is adding a new dimension to Formula One, and we all want to ensure its success in the future." Following the confirmation of the 6 sprints plan, Formula One can now explore the most suitable locations for holding the events. Imola, Austria, and Brazil were selected as the venues for this year's 3 sprint races. When it was first proposed that there would be 6 sprint races, Formula One favoured having them take place in the following locations: Bahrain, Imola, Canada, Austria, Netherlands, and Brazil. It is generally agreed upon that the sprints should be staged at locations that allow for overtaking between drivers. In what is essentially a scaled-down version of what takes place on Sundays, drivers compete across a distance of 100 kilometres, which is a third of the typical race course, in an all-out effort to secure grid positions for the Grand Prix and points for their chances of winning the championship. This year, the sprint was held at Imola and Austria. Max Verstappen won both of them, earning him the maximum possible 8 points. It will be held again at the Brazilian GP, which is the race that comes before the season-ending finale. The 20 drivers begin the race in the order in which they qualified on Friday evening, and the positions in which they cross the line 100 kilometers later will determine where they will line up for the start of the Grand Prix on Sunday. If you come in first place on Saturday, you will begin Sunday's race from pole position. If you finish in 10th place, you will begin Sunday's race in the same position as you did on Saturday. However, if you experience mechanical difficulties or crash out of the race, you will start from the back. You're enjoying this video, right? You definitely don't want to miss out on other amazing videos, so all you have to do is hit the subscription button. It's that easy. Thanks for doing that. Let's move on. Sulayem, the president of the FIA, stated that the regulatory body had modified its procedures to ensure that it would be able to deal with the increased workload that the sprint races might bring up. He said, "Thanks to close collaboration with Stefano Domenicali and our colleagues at FOM, we concluded a thorough analysis on the impact of additional sprint sessions and have adjusted relevant parameters of our work to ensure that they can continue to be regulated at the very highest level. Sprint sessions provide an exciting dynamic to the race weekend format and have proven to be popular over the past 2 seasons. I am sure that this positive trend will continue and am pleased that the World Motorsport Council has today given its approval for them to go ahead." In a note that was added to the statement issued by the FIA, the governing body made it clear that the approval of the sprint races had not resulted in a change of financial arrangements between it and the commercial rights holders of Formula One. It stated, "There have been no changes to the commercial agreements between the FIA and FOM in relation to sprint sessions. Formula One drivers have expressed their displeasure with the increased number of sprint races since the series began experimenting with a similar format 1 year ago. Max Verstappen, who has won both sprint events so far this year, has stated that he does not want additional races to be held each weekend, and that the format has not added anything to Formula One. He was honest and said, 'I would not enjoy it, I just don't like it.' He went further, saying, 'I think that Sunday's emotions and feelings should be special. That's the only time you race. That's how I grew up racing anyway. Sunday is the day to race. Anyway, so far, from the sprint races we've had, not a lot has drastically changed in terms of results. More or less, everyone starts on the same tire, and that's where you finish because you are scared to have a crash or whatever, because then you start in the back for the main race where the big coins are. Everyone is also a bit like, okay, just make sure we finish the race without any trouble. So that's not what you want, really. Yuki Tsunoda, an AlphaTauri driver, commented after learning about the intentions for the series by saying that he was surprised that MotoGP is doing that, but he is not sure that Formula One should follow suit. Tsunoda said, "I don't think there's a benefit to every race weekend doing sprint qualifying. Sprint qualifying is kind of a special thing to have, rather than just doing every race weekend. And that's why sprint qualifying is fun to watch sometimes. It's not like we want to see it every time, I think, especially with this busy, tight schedule. So I don't think we have to have that much sprint qualifying in Formula One." Valtteri Bottas also doesn't want a calendar full of sprint events, but echoed F1 president Stefano Domenicali's recent call to cut the amount of practice at race weekends. He stated, "I do not believe that it is necessary for us to hold sprints every weekend, but just less practice." He is not interested in running drills and would rather see more action, he said. "At the moment, if I would choose sprint or not sprint, I would say sprint, just because immediately we're straight into action on Friday." Formula One hoped that adding sprint races, which are competitive sessions held on each of the 3 days of track action, would make for an overall more enjoyable experience. These races were introduced by Formula One in order to increase the level of excitement throughout the entire race weekend. F1 has been exploring to modify the traditional race weekend format for a long time, although other possibilities such as reverse grid races were examined. In the end, sprint races were chosen because they were more popular. Formula One and its teams have noticed an increase in the number of viewers watching the race on television and believe this makes the sprint appealing to younger spectators. They are hoping it will secure independent sponsorship and develop into an even larger revenue source. Yes, the main goal is an increased revenue source. Not only are drivers displeased with this move, fans are also not happy with this move. The people have spoken, but F1 is not paying attention to what they have to say. When it comes to sprint racing, it never has. It gives the impression that it does not want to, opting instead to go with its fingers firmly planted in its ears. The sycophantic rush by those invested in its success, Liberty, F1, and the television presenters and pundits alike, declaring it an emphatic triumph, was perhaps the most grating aspect of F1's 3-race experiment with sprints during the previous season. At best, those with a vested interest ignored the evidence of their own eyes and allowed themselves to get a little too carried away by the novelty value and financial return they would get from increasing the number of sprint races. Every race promoter wants to have a sprint. Those were the statement of F1 sporting director Ross Brawn around the end of last year when he unveiled plans to expand the number of sprint events to 6 for 2022. However, they eventually had to settle for 3 in 2022, but they have had their way again. As soon as it became clear that the sprint was not, as promised, a flat-out, thrill-a-minute bonanza, but rather the first stint of the Grand Prix brought forward by 24 hours, the cars rapidly settled into a rhythm after the roar of a race start. The minds of the majority of fans were made up about the sprint and were not interested in it. What is your thought about the increase in the number of sprint races? Let me know in the comment section below. That will be all for today's video. Thanks for staying tuned. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and notification bell so that you can always get to watch more amazing videos like this. See you in the next video.